I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics, messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for October the 3rd, 2025. Yesterday, of course, was Yom Kippur. I trust that everyone had an easy fast. As obvious as it may be to some of us, the fast of Yom Kippur is not intended to be something which is grueling or unreasonable. So I understand if some of you completely abstain from both food and water, but within the traditional Jewish halakha, water can indeed be permitted, and if someone is at all, on the verge of fainting, then they can be given, saltine crackers, something like that. And the fast of Yom Kippur, generally speaking, is not intended for infants, the elderly, or those with a pre-existent condition. So please do keep that in mind for next year. All right. So I'm sure all of us for Yom Kippur had a different experience with what was said or what was not said at your local Messianic congregation or synagogue. Of course, there was some significant news which took place over the past few days. Still trying to sort through the attack on the synagogue in Manchester. There were some anti-Semitic posts on social media, which we're going to be getting into later. And of course, we're continuing to monitor both the situation, Israel-Gaza, the proposed Trump peace plan, the situation in Eastern Europe, Russia, Ukraine, and then just overall other things in the world and the religious community. So we do have a lot to go through. Before we get into our theology roundup, I do want to briefly mention how next week I'm going to be gone. That's the plan, at an undisclosed location. But I will be posting McKee Moment shorts probably late afternoon, early evening, similar to what we've done for the fall high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So definitely going to keep you posted on different things. And pray that we all get some rest, because in this field, you really don't get a lot of vacation. All right, so on our theology roundup, we're going to be reviewing the Book of Ecclesiastes. Traditionally, Ecclesiastes is something read during the festival of Sukkot or Tabernacles. There are many different approaches, Jewish, Christian, conservative, and liberal, to the Book of Ecclesiastes. And Ecclesiastes is one of those texts which raises, I think, more questions than answers them. So we're going to be getting into some of Ecclesiastes today. Our teaching is taken from our ministry publication, A Survey of the Holy Scriptures for the Practical Messianic, available in both paperback as well as ebook for Amazon Kindle. Now let me switch windows around and we'll get into Ecclesiastes. There are a lot of assumptions people make about the Book of Ecclesiastes, which they shouldn't. Although it's pretty clear once you get into a technical study Bible, much less Bible encyclopedia, Bible dictionary, an Old Testament introduction book, and most certainly a commentary, that there are a lot of things regarding academic discussion of Ecclesiastes, both Jewish and Christian, which tend to not appear on the radar of a lot of Messianic people. These range from not only the authorship of Ecclesiastes, the genre of Ecclesiastes, but also the canonicity or lack thereof of Ecclesiastes. Because the big question all major interpreters have regarding the Book of Ecclesiastes is, does Ecclesiastes actually uphold the doctrine of the resurrection. Because if not interpreted creatively, there are some statements appearing in the book of Ecclesiastes which can appear to dismiss the idea of a future resurrection. So that is where questions of genre, questions of authorship, authorial intent, etc., do enter into the discussion. And these are discussions which, at least in my experience, your experience might be different, I have seldom ever seen within the Messianic community. All right, so let's get into the book of Ecclesiastes. This is from a survey of the apostolic scripture, of the Holy Scriptures. That's a combination of both our Tanakh and Apostolic Scriptures workbooks from a few years ago. In this study, you are intended to take a notebook, some kind of a journal, read through the book of Ecclesiastes, keeping a journal log of people, places, key themes and events, and major scripture passages. Of course, do that in a single sitting, and you're going to be able to pick up on a lot of things regarding Ecclesiastes or any other biblical text. Okay, the theological summary of Ecclesiastes. The approximate date, the 900s BCE, those on the right. 900s BCE for composition of source material, 715 to 686 BC for redactions. That's the conservative moderate position. Or the 500s to 300s BCE, those on the left. The purpose of Ecclesiastes, to explain the common futility of human life. The author, listen very carefully. Solomon, those on the right, some conservative moderate, or Kohelet, some conservative moderate, and those on the left. This is a very big feature of evaluating the book of Ecclesiastes. Okay, the location of the author. The land of Israel or Jerusalem, right, conservative moderate. Land of Israel, Jerusalem, and or Babylon, those on the left. Okay, the target audience and their location. The people of Israel, later the people of Judah, right, conservative moderate. Southern kingdom returning or returned from Babylon, those on the left. Okay, so I probably have already interjected a few things regarding the composition of Ecclesiastes, which some of you have never heard before. A lot of people I've encountered in my Messianic experience believe that Solomon, at the end of his life, is the author of Ecclesiastes. That is definitely not a position held by those of the critical tradition, those on the left. And today you will seldom encounter conservatives who believe in that. Okay, so do keep that in mind as we get into the composition, the theological summary of Ecclesiastes. Okay. The book of Ecclesiastes is one of several important wisdom texts in the Hebrew Tanakh. Its Hebrew title, Kohelet, is derived from the term kahal, or assembly, with its author understood as some kind of officer of an assembly. Its Greek Septuagint title is Ecclesiastes, derived from the equivalent ecclesia, or kahal. The designated speaker in Ecclesiastes is Kohelet, which some prefer to render as teacher, New International Version, New Revised Standard, or preacher, New American Standard, because they are unsure what else to render it as. Jerome interpreted it in his Latin Vulgate as concionator, a speaker before the assembly. Ecclesiastes is placed among the wisdom books in Christian tradition, but in Jewish tradition is part of the 5 Megillot of the writings, which are, of course, the texts traditionally examined, although not exclusively those examined, but during festival times. That's why we're looking at Ecclesiastes today, with Sukkot coming. Ecclesiastes is generally a text which is consulted when considering the frailties of human existence and also the reality of death. There are mixed interpretations and views of Ecclesiastes from both Jewish and Christian readers. Some believe that it is an important text with an important message, and others consider it to be pessimistic and full of inconsistencies. The text of Ecclesiastes is strictly anonymous from an internal first-person reference standpoint, although there are several important propositions concerning its authorship, which notably conservatives are not agreed upon. So, when we get into one of these, composition analyses of different books of the Bible, normally it's like, well, we've got the conservative position, we've got the liberal position, and someone like me is inclined toward the conservative position. But here, we even have conservatives, the majority of conservatives, not agreed on authorship. Jewish tradition widely espouses Solomonic authorship of Ecclesiastes, although some Talmudic tradition indicates that Ecclesiastes was preserved by the men of Hezekiah, Talmud Bava Batra 14b to 15a. Many presume that Solomon wrote Ecclesiastes based on some internal remarks. Ecclesiastes 1:1, 12, 16, 2:4 through 9, 7:26 through 29, 12:9, notably making light of the author's wisdom, interest in proverbs, and building projects. It is often believed that Solomon was reflecting on the negative actions of his life in his twilight years. Those who accept Solomonic authorship date the text to sometime in the 900s BCE, perhaps 940 BCE. Now, you've probably never heard this before, although, as I said, getting started, if you have a good study Bible, Bible dictionary, encyclopedia, you're likely to have heard something along these lines. A significant number of conservatives seriously doubt Solomonic authorship. The writer is strictly known as Kohelet in Ecclesiastes, and Solomon is not at all mentioned by name. The same verses which are often used to point to Solomonic authorship are also used as being against it. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. Ecclesiastes 1:1, 12, New American Standard. Must one assume that son of David meant that Kohelet was an immediate son of David, or could he also have been a descendant of David? Note that Kohelet later said, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who were over Jerusalem before me. Ecclesiastes 1:16, New American Standard. If Kohelet was Solomon, then the all who were ruling Jerusalem before him were just David, and not a plural line of kings from the Davidic line, as is implied. Conservatives who doubt Solomonic authorship often do so because, quote, so much profound and godly wisdom originates with a man who eventually apostatized, unquote. Dillard and Longman from their Old Testament introduction. As Solomon is not often an example of great piety to consider in Scripture. Many conservatives instead advocate that a later monarch of the southern kingdom, yet of the Davidic line, was responsible for Ecclesiastes. Note that the time represented throughout Ecclesiastes does not conform well to Solomon's reign, as it is replete with hardship and difficulty for Israel. But this does not mean that much of Ecclesiastes' valid wisdom is not Solomonic in origin, having been passed down in the royal court of Judah. Some would suggest that the second wise man seen in Ecclesiastes was the actual author. Those who doubt Solomonic authorship of Ecclesiastes also point to a later and more refined style of Hebrew which is used in its composition, one which is replete with Aramaisms and borrowed Persian words. There is, however, renewed debate over whether or not the Hebrew style is really that late, with some proposing that Solomon employed a scribe with a unique style to write his treatise. Even though there are many conservatives who doubt Solomonic authorship of Ecclesiastes, they do not doubt the importance of the text. Liberal theologians deny any Solomonic involvement whatsoever with Ecclesiastes. They propose that Ecclesiastes was written sometime around the Maccabean era of the 200s BCE, considering its author to be a Jewish sage, quote, schooled in the wisdom tradition and affected by the spirit of Greek philosophy, unquote. Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible. Liberals assume that the author spoke as a pseudonym for Solomon, but nothing more. Some Jewish liberals are a little more reserved, preferring to date Ecclesiastes to the 6th to 4th centuries BCE, with a few conservatives concurring with this assessment. Liberals are unsure as to whether Ecclesiastes is a single work or is a product of several authors. Some go as far as suggesting that Ecclesiastes was originally an Aramaic secular work, religiously adopted and updated with a form of late Hebrew. Comparison with ancient Near Eastern literature supports an earlier dating of Ecclesiastes, likewise realized by the fact that the author of Ecclesiastes demonstrated no familiarity with Greek literature or composition. The default position of either conservatives or liberals is to refer to Ecclesiastes' author as simply Kohelet. The Hebrew text of Ecclesiastes is in generally good condition, with its Greek Septuagint translation being quite formal. The theological focus of Ecclesiastes is the usage of human wisdom. Some postulate that Solomon was reflecting on his wanton life and could not see beyond the visible world. Others see a more general attitude in mind, with the people of Israel being addressed by a court servant. The common themes seen in Ecclesiastes are that human life is meaningless, Ecclesiastes 1:2, New International Version, and that one must fear God and keep his commandments, Ecclesiastes 12:13, New American Standard. However, many have considered Ecclesiastes to be hedonistic because of Kohelet's remark, "There is nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and tell himself that his labor is good." Ecclesiastes 2:24, New American Standard. Quote, "The majority of interpreters judge him to be a consummate pessimist who despairs finding any good in life." Unquote, New Interpreter Study Bible. But some actually consider him to be an optimist because of his pessimism. In Ecclesiastes, readers see how human wisdom has its limits. Ecclesiastes 1:13, 16 through 18, 7:24, 8:16, and that human beings cannot achieve anything of endless endurance. One's experience often comes with disappointment. Much of Ecclesiastes has a negative tone, forcing the reader to turn to God and not his or her own strength for support. It should be noted how Ecclesiastes was a controversial text in the Jewish canon, and that its status was seriously questioned. The Pharisaical school of Hillel considered Ecclesiastes to be a text which soiled the hands. Likewise, quote, "The book's relative skepticism made it an offense to some of the conservative school, Shammai, within Judaism," unquote, International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. The synagogue ultimately accepted it, but Jewish unhappiness toward Ecclesiastes continued well into the 4th century CE. The controversy surrounding Ecclesiastes primarily concerned the Pharisees thought that Ecclesiastes did not uphold the doctrine of resurrection. So, any messianic interpretation of Ecclesiastes needs to be tempered by this same skepticism. And indeed, and this is something we have pointed out for many years as a ministry, how many people in afterlife and death and resurrection controversies, they give Ecclesiastes, a text which is ultimately anonymous, more weight than known statements of Yeshua the Messiah, the Apostle Paul, and others. So Ecclesiastes needs to be approached tactfully. Yes, it's part of the canon, but it was accepted rather late into the Jewish canon because of questions involving, did it actually uphold the doctrine of resurrection? The Christian theological tradition has likewise been suspect of Ecclesiastes, mostly because of its negative and soulish tone. But this has been changing in recent years, with some interpreters leaning toward the position that, quote, Kohelet is addressing the general public whose view is bounded by the horizons of this world. He meets them on their own ground and proceeds to convict them of its inherent vanity, unquote. New Bible Commentary Revised. This would require the author to speak more in secular terms and for readers to understand his earthbound perspective. Quote, although there is little developed sense of the hereafter, Kohelet has no doubt that God, who rules over all, will someday or in some manner bring every act to judgment, whether good or evil. 1214, unquote. International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. The inclusion of Ecclesiastes in the Christian canon also found some skepticism, but was assured given Paul's reference in Romans 8:20. Ecclesiastes is a common text from the Tanakh read in today's Messianic community. It is commonly read during the season of Sukkot or the Feast of Tabernacles, coming up soon, a tradition going back to the 11th century CE. Most Messianic readers, however, are unfamiliar with the controversies surrounding it in both Jewish and Christian history. Few are aware that Solomon was probably not the author of Ecclesiastes. Indeed, you will never, ever see me quote Ecclesiastes in the sense of Solomon says XYZ. You will only see Kohelet says XYZ. So I would be probably one of the few Messianic teachers out there you would encounter who does not adhere to Solomonic authorship of Ecclesiastes. I do believe there are Solomonic materials in Ecclesiastes, which the court speaker, Kohelet, picked up on in admonishing those of a later generation. Okay, but this is more important here. Likewise, a significant theological weakness among some is that Ecclesiastes is often given more weight than the Gospels or apostolic letters in examining some issues, notably those of death and the afterlife. While we have the strong responsibility to not treat Ecclesiastes in isolationism, we have the strong responsibility to not treat Ecclesiastes in isolation from the rest of the Bible, while respecting its unique message and the presentation style of Kohelet. So, there are some people out there in the world of theology, and they think, Ecclesiastes technically part of the Bible, but there's some statements which appear to denounce a future resurrection of the dead in clear contradiction to certainly the Gospels and apostolic letters. I'm not one of those people, but I do believe there does need to be some consideration of the vantage point of the author and how the author might be using some reverse psychology in a number of his statements. So I would never, of course, give Ecclesiastes the same theological weight as the Gospels or apostolic letters or the prophets for that matter, but I do know some people who give it more weight than it's probably due. Okay, now in the survey of Ecclesiastes in our workbook, there's some questions for reflection on Ecclesiastes. Okay, and actually one of the questions is, how much theological weight do you think Ecclesiastes should be given in the scope of the larger biblical canon? And then, of course, I also encourage you to, for the reflection on the place of Ecclesiastes, write 2 short paragraphs about what struck you about reading the book of Ecclesiastes. So, certainly, the Messianic examination of Ecclesiastes is not something which is over, but there are some factors we just mentioned in this brief summary, which I know many of you have never heard or considered before. The foremost being, who is Kohelet? All right, let me switch windows back. Okay, there we go. Excellent. And once again, what we've just gone through has been taken from our ministry workbook, A Survey of the Holy Scriptures for the Practical Messianic. Available in both paperback as well as ebook for Amazon Kindle. All right, so that concludes our theology round. We do have a lot of news to go through. And of course, we just had Yom Kippur, the holiest day on the biblical calendar, the holiest day in Judaism. Many of us woke up on Yom Kippur finding out that there was an attack at a synagogue in Manchester. Of course, we're also closely monitoring the Trump peace proposal. Israel, Gaza. Is Hamas going to agree to it, or are we going to see a resumption of hostilities? There's the situation, of course, Russia, Ukraine. Is that getting larger right now? And we've got things here on the American home front as well, which are concerning to us, and we're having to sort through. So number one, never forget this. Pray for peace, Israel, Gaza, release of the hostages, peace in the Middle East. Number two, pray for peace, Russia and Ukraine, that this conflict ends as well. And number three, pray for reason and sanity to prevail here on the American home front. And then just peace in the world, because we got a lot of different things which came across my social media feed, which we're going to be mentioning. We do the news roundup after the theology roundup, because the news is, of course, something which is time sensitive and changes from day to day. And yeah, when we come back after next week, we're going to cover a lot of news, doubtlessly. There's doubtlessly going to be some things which happen during our time away. I'll plan to mention them in piecemeal as they come up, but we'll be covering them more in detail then. But we all need a break from time to time. Okay, so let's get into the news roundup. All of the links I'm about to go through, they will be available for you to look at yourself when this episode is archived later this afternoon on MessianicApologetics.net. All right, so we start out with a story from Charisma from October the 1st. Scientists revive the days of Noah, the forbidden science that offended God. All right, so this is, of course, total speculation on fallen angels, Nephilim, etc. It makes note of scientists at Oregon Health and Science University have announced a breakthrough that they call a proof of concept. By adapting cloning technology, they have created human eggs using skin cells and donor eggs. According to the Financial Times, scientists have adopted cloning technology to create human eggs from skin cells and a donor egg, potentially opening a new route to motherhood for women who are infertile. So, this is tied into the conclusion, the corruption of DNA in Noah's day. The Bible tells us that before the flood, humanity was corrupted by fallen angels. Quoting Genesis 6:2, this unnatural union produced the Nephilim, a hybrid race that spread violence and corruption across the earth. And it also mentions the Book of Enoch, though apocryphal, gives further detail describing how these fallen beings taught humanity forbidden knowledge and mingled their seed with mankind. The Book of Giants echoes the same history, confirming the biblical account that DNA corruption was central to the judgment of the flood. Okay, and then they tie this into Matthew 24:37, days of Noah, defying God's boundaries, a sober warning. Okay, now this title, scientists revived the days of Noah, forbidden science that offended God. Is that really accurate, or is that something which is intended to generate clicks? Because while there are doubtlessly questions involving cloning, involving human eggs, this sort of thing, how much of it is actually legitimately to be tied to fallen angels, Nephilim, etc.? How much of this is really discussions in bioethics? How permitted are human beings going to be to quote unquote play God? But yes, this is still concerning. People, manipulating with human DNA, trying to create, human eggs. And yes, I understand the need for some of that in terms of. I understand the desire for some of that in terms of, what do you do with infertile women, this sort of thing. But I wouldn't tie it at all to the Nephilim of Genesis 6. Okay. From the Epoch Times, October the 1st, Walmart pointed to a survey it recently conducted which found that many customers want more transparency surrounding food ingredients. Walmart says it is removing dyes from food brands. So that is presumably with the Walmart Great Value brand, which, of course, you can also find at Sam's Club. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, one of the big changes that's supposed to have come since Robert Kennedy Jr. took over at the Health and Human Services is we're supposedly this fall going to see Coca-Cola with cane sugar. I haven't seen it yet on the shelves. I've seen Mexican Coke on the shelf, which does use cane sugar. It's re-imported into the United States. But yeah, we'll see what happens there. Okay, here's something which came across my feed on Instagram from Wild Olive Tree. He is somebody who is out there vehemently pushing back against Christian Zionism, widely believes that the state of Israel is an evil satanic enterprise, that political Zionism is of the devil. And so here he's got a short talking about how pastors are giving church members Israel fatigue. Now, he believes that God is completely finished with the ethnic descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The church is the new Israel. He also claims that various pastors out there, social media influencers, are on the quote-unquote Israel payroll, that the government of Israel is paying the money to do this kind of thing. I'm not paid money from anybody to do this, okay? We're doing this for free because we think it's an important service for the body of Messiah. Now, I do have this to say after watching this. Yes, there are diverse claims made by various pastors about Israel, Christian support for Israel, that sort of thing. Some of them are like, look, we have a biblical responsibility to support Israel, the Jewish people. We have to have the same heart that the Messiah, that the Apostle Paul and others had for the lost of their kinfolk. Or you've got those who say, you know, America, if you turn against Israel, God's going to destroy America. You have that spectrum. So there are diverse claims being made by pastors out there on social media. I don't agree with all of them. When we see some of these diverse claims made by various pastors, Christian pastors, and some of them do believe that the responsibility of evangelicalism is to support the state of Israel, so to accelerate the end time plan and get the church raptured out so the tribulation period can begin. That's absolutely wrong. When you see some of these reasons, and some of them we agree with, some of them we don't agree with, let's remember, this is why the Messianic movement is here, to help clarify things and to help provide a direction for the future, to get people locked into the Romans 11, 25 and 26, all Israel will be saved trajectory of history. That's what we are here to do. But it is absolutely true that there are going to be more and more people. This isn't the only post from him we're going to go through today. There are going to be more and more people out there bearing the name of Messiah who come against Christian Zionism. They come against Christian support of the state of Israel. Support of Israel and the Jewish people does not mean an endorsement of every single aspect of the Jewish religion, every single aspect of political Zionism, and nor does it imply that the state of Israel is the end all of God's plan. It is the important installment toward that eventual restoration of the kingdom. There has to be an independent Jewish nation state in the Middle East in order for various end-time prophecies to occur. It is going to give way to the full-on Messianic kingdom at the return of Yeshua. And yeah, there are a lot of people who don't emphasize that, even in the Messianic movement. Although, I had a conversation at Messiah 2025. Paul Lieberman came up to our table. I said, look, you need to know there are a lot of people who are coming against Isaiah 66:8 as pertaining to the establishment of the state of Israel in 1948. Oh, that's a concern. But it's also true that, as important as that was, it's an important installment toward the eventual arrival of the Messiah and the full-on restoration of the kingdom, and we totally agreed on that. All right, here's a little bit of rapture debate. Alan Didio posted, this is a common pre-tribulational claim. One tiny Greek word brings into question the idea that the church will endure the tribulation. Ek, that's a preposition. And basically it's from Revelation 3:10, I will also keep thee out of the hour of temptation. 1 Thessalonians, Jesus, which delivered us out of the wrath to come. That's eternal punishment. It's not the end times. Likewise, 1 Thessalonians 5:9, God hath not appointed us to wrath. That's eternal punishment, not the end times. But here, in response to this, Nick Uva on X says, and I think justifiably so, Revelation 3:10 was addressed to just one of 7 churches, but in Revelation 2:10, Jesus told another of those 7 churches that the devil would throw some of them in prison. Why claim that Revelation 3:10 applies to all Christians, while Revelation 2:10 only applied to the church at Smyrna? And indeed, a lot of this involves evaluating whether the hour of temptation, the hour of trial, is even the future tribulation, great tribulation, 70th week of Daniel. How do we know that it's not a situation which is going to erupt in that future time, mainly being put into the position of having to give up your faith or not? That's the direction I leaned. But that's not the way pre-tribulationists tend to think or reason through the issues. Okay, our next story, and this is from Open Source Intel Defender yesterday. This is one of the first posts I saw. You probably already know about this now. 2 people have died, and at least 3 are in serious condition following a ramming and stabbing attack this morning against the Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue in North Manchester, England. The attack occurred Thursday during a prayer service to mark Yom Kippur, with the suspect believed to have been killed within minutes by armed police, though his condition has not yet been confirmed due to the possibility of explosive devices on his person, according to Greater Manchester Police. Okay, this is so as it came through. Yeah, this is something very, very concerning to all of us. And it doesn't just involve those in this case, England. It can definitely involve people all around the world, New York City. I'm sure your own local Messianic congregation or synagogue has a security team or a security plan in place. Some Messianic congregations, they have a security team that's, certified by the state. They've gone through training. Others will frequently hire an off-duty police officer or have some arrangement with a third-party service. And these kinds of situations, they require all of us to take note of our surroundings, to always be suspicious of new people who come in. If you're not paying attention to this post Charlie Kirk's death, be paying attention to this post Manchester synagogue. And of course, our thoughts and our prayers are with the victims, the families, the friends of those who have just lost people in their community. And we always pray for God's peace and protection of our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Messianic faith community, and all believers around the world. All right, from Visegrad 24, and this is there have been a lot of reports about drones, Denmark, other countries. Denmark calls up its military reserves after unknown drones violate its airspace and force several airports to close. Now, some of these drones, which are appearing, are widely thought to be of Russian origin, not necessarily extraterrestrial origin, but it doesn't stop people from talking. Of course, for certain, when a very small country like Denmark calls up its military reserves, and keep in mind, Denmark, 5.5 million people, Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, almost 8.5 million people. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is serious if Denmark is doing this. From End Time Headlines. According to the book of Daniel, there will come an individual in the last days that will confirm a covenant with many for 7 years. Many believe this will initiate the 7-year tribulation. Are we witnessing the very framework for this as we speak? Okay, and of course, this has been highlighted by the Trump peace proposal for ending the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Many people are drawing the conclusion this could be the treaty, or this is going to set up the framework for the Daniel 9:27 treaty. We have no idea. What I am actually more concerned about is how are these peace negotiations, how are things involving Israel, Hamas, how are they going to affect us as the Messianic community, our local congregations and synagogues? Even though there are Jewish synagogues all over the world who might not actually be too happy with the Netanyahu government in Israel, that does not stop anti-Israel, anti-Zionist protesters from showing up at their front door. It does not stop acts of vandalism, acts of terrorism, and Messianic congregations are not immune to this either. I am more concerned in the short term about how are these things going to affect your safety, our safety as a Messianic faith community. A lot of people in Messianic congregations, certainly across North America, they have a building fund, and they're like, one of these days we won't meet at this church anymore. We won't meet at this elementary school anymore. We won't be in this rental situation anymore. We'll have our own building. Yet, as desirable as it is to have a permanent place for a Messianic congregation, there's actually safety in renting space from a church or renting space from a third-party place where there's a buffer. You don't have your permanent name on the place where people can find out where you are and go vandalize. This is actually very serious. We need to be paying attention. And yes, there are longer-term implications of the Trump peace plan. Could it lead to the end times accelerating? Absolutely, but we've got to be patient with this, and we've got to stay grounded as best as we can. Okay, our next story, and this is from October the 1st on Ynet Global. Absence of a clear path to Palestinian statehood could make Saudi Arabia and other states reluctant to finance the deal, Arab officials told the Wall Street Journal. So Israel shaped Trump's Gaza peace plan to sidestep Palestinian statehood. Okay, so just take notice of that and file it away. We know that while a lot of people are excited about the Trump peace plan, others are upset about it, and others are not satisfied with it. And we also know that there's even been some pullback from different voices in the Arab Islamic world. With that in mind, here's a story from Charisma. Trump pressed by evangelical leaders to affirm Israel's biblical homeland. As Israel celebrates Yom Kippur, there's still no response from Hamas on the peace proposal offered by President Trump. This is dated to yesterday. But Christian leaders in the U.S. are voicing fresh support for Israel's right to the biblical lands at the heart of ongoing disputes in the region. So, obviously, there are a lot of different opinions. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But my view is as we get closer and closer to the end, a Palestinian state is likely part of the end time scenario. You are going to see a dividing up of the biblical promised land among the nations of the earth. And while I understand the thought of those, well, if America is responsible for dividing up the land of Israel, America is going to get judged by God. At the same time, America's got righteous people who, just as the believers in the first century, the ancient Israelites in Egypt could be specially protected by him, so can believers here in the United States and wherever else be specially protected by him in spite of the end time scenario. And there does come a point where, yes, while we all think it's bad for the land of Israel, the biblical promised land, to be split up, there does come a point where if it is legitimately part of the end time scenario and we oppose it, are we opposing what God has already decreed is going to happen? This is not always easy for us to sort through, but it does have to be put out there on the table. Okay, also from End Time Headlines. This is from yesterday. Hatred for Israel is growing just as the Bible foretold. The Bible warned us that in the last days before the coming of the Lord, that Israel would be despised. The world and the nations of the earth would despise her. This is happening right before our eyes, and many in the church have taken the bait as well. Yes, this is sad to report, but the support for Israel in even conservative evangelicalism, it has taken a nosedive the past 2 years since October the 7th, 2023. And we're just 4 days away from the 2-year anniversary of that. So, yeah, please keep that in mind. I mean, Messianic ministries are not getting as many sales or contributions as they were getting. Messianic congregations are even losing people. Now, some of this is because of the propaganda out there, which promotes the idea Israel's guilty of genocide, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't take into consideration some of the precision strikes, some of the care that the Israeli government takes, warning Palestinian civilians in advance that they're going to take out Hamas. But it's also due to the fact that you don't have a huge number of Messianic rabbis or leaders step up and talk about this. And so in the view of these terrible things happening in the Middle East, if you don't mention it, you don't pray for peace, you don't pray for things like, Lord, end this conflict as soon as possible and bring the hostages home, people think, at least subconsciously, are these people complicit in these terrible acts? And of course, you know, American Messianic Jewish leaders and rabbis are not, any more than Jewish rabbis in the diaspora are. They're not. They don't live in Israel. They don't make the decisions of the Israeli government. But without saying anything or without discussing it, support for Israel has been seen to drop. And even in my own congregation, since this conflict has happened, we've lost people, and we wonder, is it because of the current situation in the Middle East? From Visegrad 24, Greta Thunberg arrested and deported by Israel again. Greta Thunberg was detained by Israeli forces today. This is from yesterday, after her ship, part of a Gaza flotilla, was intercepted by the Israeli Navy. The flotilla, composed of over 40 vessels and about 500 activists, aimed to break Israel's naval blockade of Gaza. The Israeli Foreign Ministry says Thunberg and the rest are safe and will be deported. All right, so here is a very concerning story. It's from the channel we referenced earlier. And the reason it's concerning is because it involves a close friend, Rachel Welch, of the social media channel, both on Instagram, TikTok. Hello, Mrs. Rachel. And here, we're going to have to let this cycle through again. But here the conclusion of the channel Wild Olive Tree is that Christians are not allowed to pray for the prosperity of the wicked. And so the implication, of course, is that born-again believers should not be praying for a state of Israel which rejects Jesus Christ as God, as Messiah. And the little clip of Rachel Welch on this, I'm going to reload this so you all can see her on this. Yes, there we go. Some of you all know who she is. Me, when I visited a church on October 8, 2023, and they didn't pray for Israel, she gets up and leaves. So I think by now this post has had how many views? It's had over 30,000 likes. Let me see how many views it's had. I'm not sure. I'd have to probably look at this on my phone. But I informed her about this and said, we're praying for you. I'm sure you didn't want to see several 100,000 of, views of this. But this person, this channel, very anti-Semitic, very anti-Jewish, very anti-Zionist. And when someone in the Messianic community who and you want to see succeed, and it's on Yom Kippur of all days. I mean, I found this during the Yom Kippur service at my local congregation, and then I went out and I did the McKee moment short in the parking lot, and I mentioned it. It's just like, we need to pray for her family's protection. We need to pray for all of our collective protection, because when something like that goes viral, and you can look at all the comments from that post, when something like that goes viral and you see some of the comments, including, I hope that Israel gets nuked, I support, all this kind of thing, a lot of classic anti-Semitic statements, synagogue of Satan, whatever. It really, shocking to you. And not only is it shocking to you, it's infuriating, but it also is a reminder of when we are. And we live in a very dark time. So when these things come across my path, and we see a fellow Messianic person like Rachel Welch needing our prayer and our emotional words of comfort and assurance, I'll let you know that, because we are all fighting a fight in different spheres of influence, but we're all on the same team. And, a lot of us, do take hits like that, and we need to acknowledge it publicly so you can take appropriate action. Okay, with that in mind, here we have a post from Tucker Carlson, where he says, "The chosen people are people who choose Jesus." So Tucker Carlson, of course, has been a very interesting person to watch over the past few years, especially as he has become indeed more and more anti-Israel. You can watch or listen to that, but Tucker promotes the idea that a chosen people concept is heresy. Now, I would have to argue that while the terminology chosen people does not need to be used as much as it probably is, what needs to be stressed, and I think this is what people who use the term chosen people are trying to stress, what needs to be stressed is that the ethnic descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, today's Jewish people, they have a unique destiny, a unique purpose in God's salvation historical plan. That's what needs to be stressed. They have a unique destiny, a unique purpose. And if we can understand that, yes, they sit at the very center of God's workings here on earth. It does not mean that non-Jewish Messiah followers are not chosen of him or beloved of him or cared for by him. But everything which happens on earth today is in the nexus of what God is doing with Israel and the Jewish people. They have a very important destiny as it involves the repatriation to the Holy Land, end-time events, the return of the Messiah, the emergence of the two witnesses and 144,000. I mean, there are people out there, and I generally agree with them, that the Messianic movement is here to give rise to the two witnesses and 144,000. Okay, so here's an article by Charisma. I'll let you read its contents later. Are we standing at the threshold of the Messianic era? And here it talks about a Jewish rabbi who makes names from Gematria. I don't really buy into any of that. And also the traditional Jewish year, 5785. These are the kinds of things which get me to just kind of like, okay, whatever. But it is true. It is true that we see a lot of events which are changing the face of the Middle East, the face of the world. We've seen violence against, Jewish people. Of course, we also have that terrible tragedy, massacres taking place in Nigeria of believers. There are a lot of things which God does use to get the attention of a lot of people, and we need to doubtlessly keep that in mind. Okay, speaking of the Middle East, from open source intel yesterday, Egypt's foreign minister, Abdelati, if Hamas refuses Trump plan, it will be very difficult and there will be escalation. In the commentary here, you are right. Yeah. Okay, so here is a very useful clip. Some of you all have likely seen it. It's a short interview that Dinesh D'Souza did with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I asked Bibi Netanyahu, the Jewish head of a Jewish state, to comment on the most famous Jew of all time, Jesus Christ. And yes, Netanyahu even invoked the name Yeshua. And like all of our Jewish brothers and sisters who do not know Yeshua, we pray that Netanyahu, among others, has a divine encounter with the risen Messiah. But we are here to be his friend, to be his support, and there is going to be, something of a counter response to some of the growing influence of those like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, others who are bearing the name of Jesus, but don't really want that much to do with the people of Jesus. Okay, we're going to change venues more toward the Western Hemisphere. This is an intriguing situation. We haven't talked about it that much. According to the New York Times, President Trump has declared that the U.S. is now in a formal armed conflict with cartel fighters in the Caribbean Sea. This is yesterday, open source intel, 2:20 p.m. So in the Caribbean, there is a conflict close to Venezuela between U.S. forces and drug cartels. And what's that going to mean for the Western Hemisphere? I don't know. I mean, we've all seen movies like Clear and Present Danger and others. It is something which is a problem, but we'll wait and see. I don't want to be presumptuous right now. Okay, this was posted by Charisma. This wasn't posted by some scientific journal. Shocking Saturn discovery. Could this be proof of alien life? And actually what they talk about is a recent Daily Mail report highlighted the European Space Agency may have found evidence suggesting the possibility of life on one of Saturn's moons. The Daily Mail noted that the moon, Enceladus, hope I pronounced that properly, could potentially house life under its ocean waters. This particular moon, while appearing to be empty and bare from the outside, has tiny grains of ice that are constantly being spewed into space near its South Pole region. Okay, scientists used information from the Cassini spacecraft to uncover these ice crystals, which are packed with complex organic molecules. While this discovery does not prove life on Enceladus, it does show that there is potential for life to exist on this moon. Okay, yeah, but we're not, with something like this, you're not looking at strange civilizations, right? What you are looking at is, microscopic biological life, the possibility of. But certainly, as I mentioned many times, when we were in seminary, this is precisely the kind of discovery which is going to get people asking questions about humanity's place in the universe. We reach out into the solar system. We establish a presence on Mars, a presence on the moon, different moons of Jupiter, Saturn. You're going to find microscopic things, bacteria, things like this. It's going to raise a lot of questions, and even Charisma picks it up. All right, so here's a social media post from yesterday from The Rift. Elijah Schaefer. Some of you all have heard about this by now. Israel is paying influencers $6,100 to $7,300 per post under the Esther Project, targeting Gen Z with pro-Israel propaganda through Bridge Partners and Havas Media. So those who are not inclined toward Israel, Zionism, or the Jewish people, like him, and there was a press conference Netanyahu held in New York City recently that, the Israeli government, Israelis, pro-Israel Americans and others, they need to get active on social media because we have been losing the social media foothold to pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian genocide claims. And so people who are into the worldwide Zionist conspiracy and they question the Holocaust, as Schaeffer does, and they even raise points like, well, Hitler did a lot of good for Germany, and maybe we need to be considering that today. People like that, they're going to raise awareness of this. What is not asked, of course, is, well, how much money have different, Arab states, influential Muslims with their oil dollars or whatever it is, their petrodollars, given to influence on social media to push anti-Semitic themes. And of course, this is also tied into finalizing a deal with TikTok. Larry Ellison, who's in charge of Oracle, big person behind it. Larry Ellison is a Jew who supports Israel, all this kind of crap. Yeah, I wish the state of Israel would pay me, $7,000 or so for a couple of posts. Likely not to. But yeah, this goes on both sides. It's not just on the Israel side, the pro-Israel side. It's also on the anti-Israel side. And so just keep that in mind. But this is something which we need to be informed about as Messianic people, because if there's anything which came from Yom Kippur, because I didn't see a lot of mentioning of the current world situation, Mideast situation, etc. There are a lot of people in the Messianic community that are completely uninformed that some of these things are going on about, well, Israel's going to acquire TikTok and they're going to push Zionism down our throats, blah, 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 blah. Whereas there's no discussion about, well, what about the Chinese who had a huge amount of influence on TikTok? What about some of the Islamicists who had a huge amount of influence on TikTok or any of these social media platforms? Okay, so this is the first story I saw come across my feed. It's from NBC News. Of course, we've been following the Robert Morris drama here in our backyard in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex since last year. Robert Morris, Texas megachurch pastor, pleads guilty to sexually abusing a child. Under a plea agreement, Morris was given a 10-year sentence, but he will serve only 6 months in an Oklahoma jail. And there he is. Okay, so the Robert Morris situation, Gateway Church, everyone has to sort through this on their own in the Messianic community, because we know that the Gateway Church enterprise does intersect directly with Messianic Judaism because of the Gateway Center for Israel and also because of the King's University, where a huge number of up-and-coming Messianic rabbis and leaders are getting their education. This is not the end of the Gateway drama, but this is a huge development in the Gateway drama, and there are a lot of stories elsewhere. This is the first one that I saw. Definitely, it's hit the different religious media outlets as well. Okay, to the Middle East. This is from yesterday, October the 2nd, from the New York Post. Hamas military chief rejects Trump's ceasefire plan, aims to keep fighting. Report. Of course, you can look through this. I'm sorry that the font does this. When I go do the live stream, I use the DuckDuckGo browser. But yeah, if this is at all true, Hamas is going to reject the Trump peace proposal, is going to keep on fighting. Okay, you want to get bombed into the Stone Ages, it's your ass. That's basically my approach to it. Okay, from Breitbart, from on the American home front, all this hitting on Yom Kippur. Steve Bannon to Peter Schweitzer. Charges against Comey are just the appetizers. So this is Breitbart, of course, reporting from Steve Bannon, whether you like Steve Bannon or not. The indictment of former FBI Director James Comey has raised cries of lawfare from Democrats declaring that President Donald Trump's administration is going after his political opponents. It's a rich charge to make given the number of prosecutions against both Trump and those in his orbit during and following his first term. One of those targeted during Trump's first term, Bannon's War Room. Steve Bannon joins the Drill Down podcast on the most recent episode. So look, just take this as a road sign. There are developments here on the American home front, which are likely to get very interesting in the coming months. And I took notice of that headline because, of course, it's Yom Kippur. So what we're just seeing with Comey and Russiagate, it may just be the start. We don't know. And it's not going to end up well anyway. Who can we trust in our government? Who can we trust anywhere in a high position of power or influence? All right, from Protestia. Here's a good one. I mean, all on Yom Kippur. This is from October the 2nd. United Church of Christ Reverend Dr. Lori Walke. Yes, that is a female pastor, but here with a title, Reverend Dr. Lori Walke, tells her congregation she doesn't know if there's a heaven or that she even believes in it, and is an agnostic about it. And this is a 54-second clip. Okay, anyone who knows, certainly North American denominations, knows that the United Church of Christ is notoriously liberal and progressive. But really, if you are in religion, whether you're female or male, this could have been a male saying this, and you have a title like Reverend Doctor, and you're not sure if there's a heaven or not, you're not sure if there's an afterlife of any kind, a resurrection, some kind of existence after this life on earth. I mean, do you believe in God? Do you believe that there's a supreme being? Or is this just an interesting philosophy to you? And we're going to see a lot more of this, I'm afraid, in the coming days. All right. So this is the clip that is getting a lot of circulation on social media. This is Netanyahu addressing social media influencers in New York, saying that pro-Israel influencers need to, we need to work with TikTok. We need to work with Elon Musk and the platform X. Excuse me. And it's getting a lot of responses from those who are on more the anti-Israel side than not. But here, from the X channel Dead President Show, when TikTok was owned by the CCP, Communist China, who is in bed with the Islamicists, nobody cared about the harm and disinformation campaign being waged against America, Israel, Jews, and Zionism. Now, magically, everyone cares. When an information war is being fought against you, you combat that with your own information war. But of course, a lot of people out there on the anti-Israel side, the Jews control the media, the Jews control the banks. I mean, we've heard this crap before. But today's Messianic community needs to be aware of it, because when your congregation, I'll just make it easy, when you broadcast your Shabbat service on Saturday morning on a YouTube, expect social media blowback, expect negative comments. Are you psychologically prepared for that? Are you psychologically prepared for anything from F you to Free Palestine, you genocidal blank, blank, blanks, to various other remarks which are so reprehensible, we will not repeat them here. We get those kinds of remarks on our social media platforms. Generally speaking, they tend to be flagged automatically, and so they're put in a blocked or saved section so we can look at them and approve them or not. But this is the world in which we live, and we need to be aware of it. Okay, to Europe. This is from Open Source Intel Defender yesterday evening, October the 2nd. Munich International Airport in Germany was closed earlier tonight, with dozens of flights being grounded and canceled, while at least 15 incoming flights were diverted to airports in the German cities of Stuttgart, Nuremberg, and Frankfurt, as well as Vienna, Austria, following the sighting of unidentified drones in the airspace around Munich. The sighting, which was originally made by air traffic control and later confirmed by police helicopters, appears to be similar to drone sightings throughout the last few weeks over airports and other critical sites in Denmark and Northern Europe. Okay, and of course, the speculation is that, no, these are not extraterrestrial, they're probably Russian. And the Russian government is likely pushing the limits of NATO right now. That's what a lot of us would assume. It was serious enough for Denmark to call up all those reservists. Okay, this is from Visegrad 24. I'm not going to go through this all, but here is this is from last night. That's a picture of a Chinese J-6 fighter jet. Okay, so China has revealed its new suicide drones made out of old converted J-6 fighter jets from the 1950s and 60s. The plane was a supersonic workhorse with Mach 1.3 speeds and a 700-kilometer combat range, but became obsolete by the 2010s as China shifted to advanced jets like the J-20. And so here you see nearly 1,000 planes are believed to have been converted, and there could be 2,000 more J-6s waiting for the same transformation. The low-cost strategy of turning scrap into assets helps easing production burdens on state enterprises. So the whole idea is that you take these decommissioned aircraft from the 50s and 60s and then change them into various drones. And, I just think about this. I'm so sorry, but because I know many of us rightly concerned about, seeing the parade in Beijing a number of weeks ago commemorating the end of the Second World War, and you had President Xi there with President Putin and also Kim Jong-un, and you think to yourself, okay, yeah, there are a lot of advanced Chinese technologies here, but their drones are these, pieces of shit from the 1950s and 1960s, basically, and they're just repurposed. So, yes, I'm concerned about the rise of China, but at the same time, let's remember these kinds of things. But then you're also reminded of how the B-52 bombers, they go back to the 1950s, and they just have been repurposed and upgraded as well. So, this happens, I guess, with even the great powers who wanting to save money and save resources for other things. Okay, back to the Russian front. Here you have open source Intel Defender. Yesterday, October the 7th, 11:40 p.m., Sky News is reporting that the Ukrainian armed forces, with intelligence support from NATO and the United States, is preparing for a large-scale drone and missile strike campaign, accompanied by a potential ground offensive against Kherson and Zaporizhia, I hope I pronounced that properly, in Russian-occupied southeastern Ukraine, as well as Crimea, which could begin as early as December 2025. Then it goes into some other speculation involving U.S. and involvement. Okay, the point to take from that is a new offensive, December 2025. I mean, we're approaching, as soon as 2026 starts, we're approaching the 4-year mark of this Russia-Ukraine conflict, and it needs to come to an end. It really does. I hope you all are praying for peace in Russia and Ukraine, and I know that it's difficult, especially in the Messianic community, because after North America, the largest Messianic Jewish community is in Ukraine. And then after that, the next largest Messianic Jewish community is in Russia. Yesterday at Yom Kippur, some of our Ukrainian friends sat right in the row in front of us. So, but we still have to be able to pray for peace, because if not, we're going to see this conflict get larger. We've talked about Denmark. We've talked about Germany now. What's going to be next? Okay, to the Middle East. Open source intel, this is from this morning, 2:40 a.m. A Hamas official told AFP, Hamas is still continuing consultations regarding Trump's plan. Consultations are ongoing and need some time. Trump on Tuesday set an ultimatum for Hamas of 3 to 4 days to accept his plan to end the nearly 2-year war in the Palestinian territory. We've got some more to say on that in a moment. So Hamas trying to delay this. This is not something unexpected. Okay, open source intel. Later from this morning, 4:30 a.m., Egyptian sources speaking to Al Akbar, the Lebanese outlet linked to Hezbollah, say senior U.S. officials told Cairo that Trump's plan is the last chance. If it fails, Israel will be given a green light to mount a sweeping campaign in Gaza to crush Hamas and allied factions. Yeah, they're reaching a point of no return. Yeah, it's time to either make peace and implement some of these proposals, or it's all going to hit. Okay, I woke up to this morning. This is a noteworthy story. Financial Times, although it's hit a lot of other venues on social media. Dame Sarah Mullally, hope I pronounced that properly, has been named the 106th Archbishop of Canterbury, becoming the first woman to hold the Church of England's most senior clerical position. Sarah Mullally has been named as the first female Archbishop of Canterbury. Okay, and before you go off and say, she's a female in a position of religious leadership, she's going to be hyper-liberal and pro-abortion. She does appear to be hyper-liberal and pro-abortion, although I don't know all of her other positions. The last two archbishops of Canterbury who have been male, they've also been pretty liberal and progressive as well. So keep that in mind. And I remember that, and this has been going on for a while in many different large denominations. When I lived in Orlando and visited my Episcopal relatives in Jacksonville, and they attended an Episcopal church, part of the the Worldwide Anglican Church, which ultimately recognized at the time the Queen as the head of the church. It was the diocese they were a part of was internally divided between conservatives and liberals. Their rector was an evangelical; he was conservative. I don't think that, since he's retired, I don't believe his replacement is conservative at all. But all major denominations, all major groups have gone through this. There's also huge numbers of Anglicans who are mainly in Africa, also India, some parts of America, and they're more conservative than not. And I remember, it was probably 2008, 2009. Their church in Jacksonville tried to break away from their local diocese and join one of these Anglican communions out of Africa, and they ultimately couldn't do it because of the matter of the church property. But you're going to see this more and more and more. I think the church of this new Archbishop of Canterbury is probably more blatantly liberal than Pope Leo XIV. I mean, there've been some developments with him this week, which we're not actually going to go into. We'll see what the next couple of days or weeks brings. But yeah, we take a note of this, and every denomination frequently tends to have this conservative liberal divide. And even in the Messianic community, while we tend to encounter those in Messianic Judaism who are actually a bit too overly conservative, there are various leaders who lean to the left, politically and even religiously. But I'd have to have some specific examples to refer you to. Otherwise, it would just be things I've encountered in person and my experience. Okay, here's another story. We got 4 more to go. This is from this morning, Visegrad 24. Breaking: Trump sets a 6 p.m. Sunday deadline for Hamas to agree to his peace deal. Okay, so Trump is no more BS. Sunday. That's the Trump administration's deadline. And we got one final story about that when we close. Okay, so here is a clip. My mother passed this on to me on Instagram. Pastor Dusami Washington dives deep into Christianity, Zionism, and anti-Semitism. This is very useful to watch. I believe a while back he was interviewed by First Fruits of Zion. I'm just offering that as information. But he is a strong online advocate, Christian advocate for Israel and Zionism. And he does go into some of the things involving Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson. I'm adding to this. There are question marks now surrounding Megyn Kelly, some of these more or less customary conservative voices who a lot of us have listened to over the years and been influenced by. And again, we just offer this to you as information because we've got to be aware of this. Some people are just now finding out, oh, I thought Tucker Carlson was pro-Israel. Then you haven't been paying attention to a lot of the things he's been putting out the past year or so. A big part of what we're doing in apologetics here is raising awareness of some of these issues so you are not caught unaware or broadsided. Now, let's go all the way to the Far East from open source intel. This is from this morning, 10:38 a.m. Hong Kong to install tens of thousands of surveillance cameras with AI-powered facial recognition, the city's security chief said on Friday. Now, Hong Kong still is a special administrative area of the People's Republic of China. It's not fully integrated into the People's Republic. That goes back to the British handover in 1997. But Hong Kong is said to now be enacting cameras for AI facial recognition. You're not going to have any privacy in Hong Kong, which raises the question, how much privacy do they have in China proper? And what other countries are going to begin doing this? I'm glad I live in the state of Texas. All right, and then finally, this is from Newsmax, and we're going to end on this note. This is from today, very close to us going live. If this last chance agreement is not reached, all hell, like no one has ever seen before, will break out against Hamas. There will be peace in the Middle East one way or the other. Okay, so, and look at this. The first comment that appears on Instagram, Israel flag controls our government and media. Okay, so all this anti-Zionism, anti-Israel stuff, I mean, it is all over social media. Okay, but yeah, Trump basically saying that, yeah, if Hamas doesn't agree, all hell is going to break loose in the Middle East and there is going to be peace. And so as believers in Israel's Messiah, Yeshua, we have the responsibility to pray for peace, the release of the hostages, peace in the Middle East, a lessening of tensions. Same is true for the situation, Russia, Ukraine, now bringing in some of these other Western European countries, it seems. Likewise, what's going to occur here on the American home front and what's happening even in the religious world. We've covered a lot of different things across the spectrum. All these stories mainly came from Yom Kippur. Now, the Festival of Tabernacles, Sukkot, which is coming up, that doesn't often tend to be associated with drama as much as it is one of relaxing and rejoicing in the Lord. That's why at a time where there can actually be more levity than is appropriate, it's recommended read the Book of Ecclesiastes, encounter some of its pessimism to calm down from eating or drinking too much or whatever it might be. But we still have a responsibility to be pressing into the Lord. There's still many, many things we got to be praying about. He is in complete control, and he is definitely with us. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and support for our ministry efforts. Please do visit our website, messianicapologetics.net, where you can encounter a wide number of free articles, frequently asked questions entries, back issues of Outreach Israel News, back episodes of Messianic Insider, McKee Moment Shorts, etc. And you can look into our many adventures over the years. And before we conclude, next week, we're not going to have Messianic Insider because it is Sukkot, but I do plan to post McKee Moment Shorts, probably late afternoon, early evening. And if there is a specific news item which we need to be paying attention to, I will raise your attention to that. We'll see you again after the Sukkot Feast of Tabernacles holiday, resuming Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you. Shabbat Shalom for this evening, and take care.